Welcome to the next episode of the State Smash podcast. This is Jeremiah Harding, or Insanity is Free, as you can find me around the internet. The last episode was very successful. We had Sanlay Tat on to discuss his experience in the Marines. We had a good deal of discussion about basically what went into him joining and why he decided that he regretted his actions there. And it was a very productive discussion. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started with our next guest. This program is brought to you by libertymugs.com. You can find the libertarian-themed mug of your choice at libertymugs.com using the ref link in the bottom in the description of this video. And I'd encourage as many people as possible to go get the mug that will annoy as many coworkers as possible, and make you the most popular person around that water cooler to bag on for their terrible fringe niche views. That out of the way, there are many other ways to support the podcast. In the description, there are several cryptocurrencies you can donate. There's Federal Reserve notes that you can donate with Ko-fi, which is a service designed to have tiny donations that go toward greater goals. My current goal is a better laptop, so if you wanted to assist me with that, the link is in the description. And you can also buy a shirt. I have plenty of shirts that are related to the anti-war effort, and additionally a Discord server for the anti-war effort specifically. So feel free to join that Discord and support the show in any way you would like. It's very much appreciated. Anything helps. But without wasting too much more time on the specifics, this is Max. He is an he was an operations specialist second class, and he was in the Navy during Operation Iraqi Freedom and Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Yeah, those two. The caffeine's just kicking in for those of you who can't already tell. And he is here to discuss his anti-war experience there. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, Max, whatever you're comfortable with. He wants to remain anonymous, by the way. That's why largely there's no information about him in the description like there was for Sanlay Tat. But just tell us anything you want to tell us about yourself specifically.
Well, for those that don't really speak much in the way of military operation names, that the Operation Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Iraqi Freedom was, of course, Iraq, and Enduring Freedom was Afghanistan. I was on deployment that sort of handled both. On an aircraft carrier, I was basically a radar guy that looked at a radar screen and said, "Hey, there's an airplane over there," for a better part of 6 to 8 hours a day. That was basically my job. And, standing watch like that for 6 to 8 hours a day. There was not a whole lot going on there. Just, that was about it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, like I did last time, why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to join in the first place, and largely what were the circumstances around you growing up in a mindset that would allow you to join in the first place?
Well, I was 19 and I wanted adventure. That was basically why I wanted to join in the first place. College money, so I could get some college funds and all that, so I could get so I could pay for college and all that. There was no real patriotism or anything going on with that. No, I must do this to serve my country or anything like that. No really other reason other than I'll just do it to pay for college and to get out of my state and to see the world and such, and I'll just do it to
And if
you
you
know
don't
to
mind me asking, what state was that? Like about where did you grow up? Was it rural or urban?
urbanish. It was in Utah,
Gotcha. So
so
so I mean, was it boring there? Is that why you sought adventure?
yeah, it felt boring at the time, but that was mostly just being a teenager. Everything's boring.
Yeah.
No matter where you are, if you live there, it's boring. You could be in California or Oregon or New York or whatever, and it's boring there, and you want to go somewhere else, and then you sort of appreciate where you come from, and
Did you
want to
find
go
out the
back.
grass wasn't very green on the other side?
Basically, yeah. I found a newfound appreciation for my state, for where I live now, and for where I used to live and all that stuff. So yeah, found out that Utah wasn't all that bad.
Yeah. Well, so what made Utah quote bad? Like what kind of things happened in your hometown or didn't happen? Was it like one of those old folks urban communities, or was it more just like, one of those places that's like sprawled out and like sort of like wastelandy?
Um, it was more of a sprawled out, I suppose. There's a perception of like the predominant religion here of Mormonism and all that, of that being in control of everything and every all that, and but when you come from the outside, it's really not that bad. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of laws and everything and all that stuff, almost controlled by Mormonism and all the Mormons around here, but it really, I mean, it is pretty bad. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like a theocracy or whatever that people seem to think it is, and not worth joining the military over essentially.
Yeah. All right. So like were you recruited on your campus?
I actually went to a recruiting office.
Okay. And what was that experience like?
They were seemed like they were sort of hurting for recruits. This was like a few years after 9/11.
So we're doing like the hard sell.
Yeah, basically. Like, oh yeah, it's yeah, yeah, you can totally get college. Everything you've heard about it is true. Everything, all the bad stuff's false. All the good stuff's true. It's you'll make lots of money. Here's a sign-on bonus. Oh, by the way, we put out on your paperwork that you're American Indian, even though you're not, so you could get an even bigger sign-on bonus.
Oh wow,
Things like
so
that.
so they scammed you in?
Basically, yeah. And,
Wow.
and had
I've
to.
never heard about that. I've never heard about scamming somebody in. That's interesting.
It was sort of interesting when I found out like halfway through boot camp too. Like this paperwork says you're American Indian. Is that true? Um, no, no, I'm not. I had a talk with my recruiter after that, and he said, "Oh yeah, I did that just for quota purposes and just to see what would happen, and so it would look good on my reports." And figured he wouldn't
Gotcha.
mind. And I was like, I would have been nice to know beforehand, but whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So on that level, so he didn't like tell you he was going to do it and then do
Right.
it. It wasn't like, we'll call you an Indian and
Right.
and like get you extra money. It was more like, he did it behind your back.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting on its own. All right. Well, I've got to figure out then how much that happens. That might make an interesting article on its own.
And I have no idea how often that happens. It was just happens to me, and I haven't really bothered asking how many other people have had it happen to either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because the military industrial complex doesn't like it isn't just with bombs and like bullets. It's also with like like how well the recruiters do, how well the ad campaigns do. The whole
Right.
thing is an industry, so it wouldn't
Right.
surprise me if that was just a really common practice.
Wouldn't surprise me either if they just stopped asking, like, "Are you sure you're really American Indian or some other minority?" You know, and they just have it on there that some Joe Blow white guy from Kansas is, half American Indian, quarter, you know, Pakistani or whatever, and not even bothering to look it up or care.
Yeah, he has like a dime's worth of it in him.
Yeah.
All right, so what was boot camp like for you?
Uh, oh boy. It was, it was, it was tough, but also seemed like a huge joke at the same time.
Hmm. In what
Um,
way? Mind expanding on that?
certainly. Like I could tell they were trying to break us down, like because there's a definite sense of like I know this is going to sound overly dramatic or whatever, but there was definitely brainwashing going on there. Like
Why is that overly dramatic? That is what they're doing.
I know it's just I, I sometimes I feel like oh they're just brainwashing and it's just like oh that's not what they're doing. They're making you better people or whatever. And anyways, sorry. Um,
Well, I mean, because you're talking to me anyway,
yeah,
and
I know.
I've gone on record as saying public school is brainwashing. You know
Fair.
that
Okay.
that a lot of the church system is brainwashing because it's pro government. You know,
Right.
because like people don't really think about that. They don't think about like what surrounds the information they're getting. They just think about the information itself a lot of the time, and
Right.
it can seem quote overly dramatic to call something like that brainwashing when you don't consider the fact that basically they're saying that without your unit, you're nothing.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, so it was brainwashing, and it was like, I mean, we're talking like cult levels of brainwashing here, like Heaven's Gate level brainwashing of like not even like trying to scrub away the like individual parts of what makes you you with like the identical haircuts and uniforms and being punished for what some other guy did that you couldn't that you had no part in and just stuff like that that was just horrible to go through. But like coupled with that, but like random ass classroom activities and like the physical exertion and I don't know. It's boot camp was weird.
Well, and I mean, those sorts of things, as far as I'm aware, because I've looked into that a bit. I've never served, but I've looked into that a bit.
Yeah.
The like part of that is to get you to like obey any order, like to
Right.
do anything, and like the reasons that they often give for that sort of thing are essentially that you if you do something stupid out on the field, then your unit will be affected by it. So you should get used to being treated as part of a unit rather than an individual, because then your entire unit and you will respect like the gravity of situations that you get into on the field.
Right. Exactly. And
Eh,
and
Go ahead.
it also sort of like 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 the Nuremberg defense of I was just following orders. Like you're in boot camp, you're taught that that's how you're supposed to think of if you're just following orders, it's not your fault. It's your
Yeah.
commanding officer's fault. And even though the Geneva Convention and the Nuremberg trials and all that stuff say that's bullshit, that it is your fault. If you're just following orders, it is still your fault. That's still not taught in boot camp. That's still not taught to you in boot camp. It's you're basically removed any sort of self responsibility and passing it either on up to your commanding officer or spreading it around to the rest of your unit.
Right.
So,
Well, and it makes sense in the sense that, if you don't think that way, then there's a possibility that you'll just go AWOL on any given mission. I
right,
mean, so it makes sense from the perspective of trying to churn out blind order followers. But it doesn't make sense in the sense of trying to preserve individuality and humanity and a sense of like real world purpose. Because the only thing it does is get you to like literally wash your brain of what made you you so that you can become green or blue in this case.
right.
So I mean it is brainwashing. They just make excuses for the brainwashing. I'm sure if you talked to a drill sergeant that they'd probably be the first to tell you, yeah, we're brainwashing you, but it's for your good.
Right. And I'm sure they would too. And it and it, like and it's still just like it feels like a violation. It like once you start realizing that it's like because it's like part of your identity is taken away, and
Yeah.
there's really and it's just like nothing you could really do about it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, except leave boot camp and then you lose everything and you still have to go back to a place you can't afford.
Right, exactly. You
Like
know,
you've cashed in your chips, you're pretty much all in.
right. Can't really do
Yeah.
much after that.
And so after boot camp, after you graduated boot camp, did they immediately station you or did you have to do anything domestically first?
They sent me to what's known as A school, where I learned how to do my the operations specialist portion of my job. The radar watch portion of my job.
Gotcha. So they basically sent you to a technical college for Navy people.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And what was that like?
Uh, um, Sort of a more relaxed version of boot camp.
So
I
you
was
you still had like an hour that you had to get up on. You it was still a pretty rigid schedule with a pretty rigid meal regimen.
right,
But only like they wanted you to be relaxed enough to learn.
right, exactly. Like when they let us out of class at the end of the day or whatever, they would we could go off base and check out movies or what have you.
Gotcha. Okay. So and in that regard, in both boot camp and this A school, did you meet anybody that you still know today?
Sorry, trying to remember back and no, most everyone I know today met later on the ship.
Gotcha. Yeah, because like I've heard a whole lot of stories of people um like making lasting relationships in boot camp and etc. Like I've known this guy since we both got signed up.
Right,
Things like that. And I think that a lot of the time those are just like minority situations and you deal with boot camp, but you're not really there for it.
right. Like with boot camp or A school, I honestly don't remember the names of anybody in either boot camp or A school.
Gotcha. All right. So past that, I mean, like, did you when you got out of A school, did you immediately get sent to like an FOB?
Assuming you mean ship, yes. Um, I was sent to an aircraft carrier. Um, where I basically where they basically said all the stuff you learned in A school is probably wrong, which is fairly common for military stuff. Um, and I got taught how they really do things, and turns out some of that stuff was wrong when you go on deployment. So yeah, um, so yeah, that was took me about a year before I was actually out to sea and on deployment. After that,
Gotcha. Okay, so when you were on the boat, proverbially speaking, what did you see there that influenced your current anti-war politics?
Uh, um, a lot of it started with how inefficient everything was. Um, I mean, like with inspections of like all the materials and all the stuff and all that, or in how like all the equipment and everything was like some of it was like 50 or 60 years old, and some of the computers we were using were like some of them literally still had tubes, like vacuum tube computers for like fire control, like missile guidance systems and all that stuff. Um,
Oh yeah, and like, the floppy disks, they still
yeah,
used floppy disks, right?
yeah. I mean, this was like like 13 years ago or so, so it wasn't that uncommon. But yeah, still they were still pretty outdated. Um, but
And this was under Bush, right? This was under the first Bush,
second,
or sorry, the second Bush. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was. So it was still sort of like floppy disks were still sort of like definitely on the way out, like, and definitely already out in the civilian world, but like not quite uncommon in the civilian. Not, I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? They were definitely obsolete in the civilian world, but still sometimes there in the civilian world, if that makes any sense. So,
So you would have been sent there if I understand this correctly. You would have been sent to the boat around like, 04, 06 area.
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And how long was your stint there?
I was stationed there about 3.5 years.
Gotcha. Okay, so you were stationed there 3.5 years. Did you do anything after that, or were you done?
After that, I was done.
Okay, so while you were on the boat, you talk about inefficiency. Was there anything in the command structure that you found out you didn't like?
Um, I didn't like the like all the shit rolling downhill, as I'm sure you've heard from a lot of other veterans or anything like that. Like if some bullshit needed to be done, it was always the lower ranked people that had to do it or anything like that. Um, Being lower ranked, you weren't really exposed to any policy decisions or any policy changes or anything. Um, because when you're going through boot camp and all that stuff, you're sort of taught, you're doing this, protect freedom, democracy around the world, et cetera, and and here you are sweeping a hallway or cleaning out a toilet or whatever, and you're sort of wondering how the hell did the freedom and democracy of the world end up in this toilet, you know?
Yeah, or how well, and also like the idea of you're doing this on a ship in the middle of nowhere,
Uh-huh.
and you still haven't really seen anything threatening the US, right?
Right, exactly. And and especially the U.S. directly. What am I like? How did all this freedom or democracy? Why does it need protecting out here instead of back in the U.S.? Why are we protecting the U.S. instead of why are we do what are we doing out in the Gulf or out in the Middle East?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you were a radar specialist, right?
Right.
That was your operations specialist like
Yeah.
post essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
So, I talk a lot about on my other things about proxy war and about how like essentially a lot of these things turn into video games for people. How
Uh-huh.
like they treat it just like, they're getting a high score or something. So, did you feel connected to the dots on the screen, or were they just dots to you?
Uh, they were mostly dots. I didn't really see anything get shot down or anything. Um, but like they were mostly just dots and blips on the radar screen. I mean, a lot of times I could go out and look, but if I really wanted to, um, but honestly, yeah, there were just dots, blips on the radar screens that I would just tag and tell whatever officer in charge that yeah, that's a civilian airliner or that's a Iranian aircraft or something that might be worth looking at if they get too close or something, you know. But I mean, it was still sort of, you know, sort of video gamey. The funny thing you should mention that though is that there were a lot of people on the ship that were almost practically convinced that they were just doing circles in the Atlantic Ocean, and because they couldn't see any like land masses or maps or anything, they sort of thought that they were just doing circles in the Atlantic. They weren't actually in the Persian Gulf. They couldn't tell where they were.
That's interesting. So basically, a lot of people were very disenfranchised with it because they didn't feel connected to what they were doing.
Right, exactly.
And like you talked about wanting adventure. Did that satisfy your adventure desire at all?
Not really. I mean, I went to see some like, you know, like Rome and Greece and all that stuff, but not really. Not a whole lot of adventure happened.
So on that level, then, did other people that you knew join for adventure, and were they similarly disenfranchised?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Because like that's one of the problems that I see pretty regularly is that people join because of the epic Navy thing, like the commercial that they see, and they don't really think like, oh, this is gonna go exactly like the way that any other job would be, and I'll be essentially in a cubicle.
Right. Yeah, not very adventurous. Staring at a radar screen or sweating it out on the flight deck, moving planes around.
Yeah. And so on that level, um, you said you met some people on the boat that you still talk to. Uh,
Yeah.
are they also anti-war?
Um, couple of them are. There's a good few of them that are pretty gung ho MAGA Trump types, of course. But there's a quite a few that I'd have to ask them directly, but I'm pretty sure they might be anti-war. Um, yeah,
Well,
I think so.
have any of them talked to you about regretting joining?
Um, not directly. It's something that's sort of hard to talk about with other veterans.
Yeah,
At
because you're
least,
afraid you're gonna step on toes, right?
right? Yeah, you don't want to say, oh, you know, I kind of regret joining. And it's like, well, you know, you hate America now or whatever. You don't know if the person you're talking to is gonna, you know, do that.
Yeah, you don't know if they're gonna be like sympathetic or just
Right.
think you're being hostile.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to figure out like suss out who you're talking to, even if you've been good friends for a while. Um,
So were you talking? Were you talking to anybody at the time that seemed sympathetic?
um, a little bit. But I mean, as of right now, it's from what I'm seeing, there's a good few people that seem like on board with the whole, excuse me, that seem on board with the whole this whole Syria thing's messed up.
Yeah.
But
Well, and that's good on its own.
yeah,
So let's bridge off into Syria.
okay.
What are your views on how Trump is handling Syria?
Why are we bombing Syria? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Uh, I I honestly don't see the point in bombing Syria in the first place, simply because I just I don't understand it. I mean, whether or not Assad's using chemical weapons on his people or not shouldn't make any difference to me. Shouldn't make any difference at all.
Yeah, and there's an article that I tweeted out because I tweet out automatically anything from the Free Thought Project,
Right,
and it's essentially that the U.S. Should have been, if Syria should have been bombed, then so should the U.S. for what they did to Waco, you
right.
know. And people don't really think about it that way a lot of the time because they're disconnected. Like
Uh-huh.
the article says, by U.S. standards, America should have been bombed for what happened in Texas 25 years ago today.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that was published much earlier today because it's the 19th. It's the anniversary of the Waco raid,
Right.
and it says while the U.S. state while the United States military maintained that the 120 missiles launched in the attack destroyed a facility that was used to produce chemical weapons. Witnesses on the ground in Douma, Syria, claimed that the airstrikes actually destroyed a cancer research facility. Which, first off, that's an interesting thing to bridge off into. I ever since I found out about it, I bring up Bill Clinton's bombing that Sudanese pharmaceutical factory and
Uh-huh.
killing basically 30,000 people.
Jeez.
Um, so because he killed, it's not like they were all just sort of there. It's not like, it was like some massive pharmaceutical compound and there were 30,000 people in it.
Right.
Like, but the lasting effects of not being able to get access to medication, affordable access to medication, and
Uh-huh.
not having that medication in the region locally meant that a lot of the locals died. 30,000 people in total, estimated to have been killed. Like plus that, like it's upwards of 30,000. It's not downwards. So
Right.
and and so if the idea that a government, this is more from the article, would use chemicals to kill dozens of its own citizens is so abhorrent that the US would risk World War III to take a stand against it, then it must mean that the US would never do the same thing to its own citizens, for fear that it could be subjected to a similar response from another country, right? However, on April 19th, 1993, there was a government there was a government raid that used chemical weapons on its own people, and nearly 80 men, women, and children died as a result. But the attack was not carried out by the Syrian government, and it did not happen in the Middle East. It took place in Waco, Texas, and it was perpetrated by the United States government. And people don't think of it in that term. They don't think
Right.
of it in the terms of like, well, if the U.S. can go off and do this sort of thing because the U.S. um, like is the fighter of terrorism, then what happens when the US is the terrorist? Nobody considers that.
Right. That's sort of a tough thing to swallow too. I mean, to sort of bring it back, it's definitely a tough thing to swallow as a veteran. You know,
Right.
because you're sort of implicitly supporting it. Like, when your government does shit like that, and it's like, am I part of that? Am I? What if I'm ordered to do stuff like that? What am I supposed to do? Am I
Yeah. Well, and not to mention the fact that if you do start to step out of line, people treat it as though you're a part of your unit that's defecting.
right? And yeah, uh, that sort of thing is definitely part of the reason why I wanted to get out as soon as possible.
So on that level, were you ever like responsible for any sorts of airstrikes on any like sort of territory, or were you just basically there, uh, like to take down aircraft that would have destroyed some aspect of the U.S. military?
As far as I know, I was only there to monitor the airspace. I wasn't one to like say, to point at something and say destroy that, or whatever. Um, I was only there to just monitor and say, hey, this might be getting a bit too close. We better call them off and warn them, and that would usually do it. Um, but other than that, there was really nothing that, as far as I know, there was, there might have been something, several steps down the line where something I might have reported on or tracked or something like that might have gotten shot down or something, several steps down the line. But there's like absolutely no way I could have known about it or done anything to prevent it or anything like that, as far as I could tell, anyways.
So basically, you were intel.
Basically, essentially, in a manner of speaking, yeah. Like scouting, I guess, is the best way to put it. The eyes.
Gotcha. Okay, and so when you were behind that screen, did it take time to get used to, or did you immediately just settle into the role?
Um, it took a little bit of time to get used to. It took a lot of time to get used to the flow of information that needed to occur, of like of getting used to keeping an eye on every little thing that was popping up in and out of the screen, making sure to give all that information to someone else, that to the people that needed it, and making sure I kept track of all my own stuff, and just keeping everything around, and just making sure that all the information was being sent to where it was supposed to go. But once I got used to that, at that point it was fairly easy for me to get to settle in and get used to.
So basically, then, if I'm not speaking out of pocket, basically, you got numb to it after you realized the sort of mundane nature of it.
Yeah, essentially. That was,
So
yeah.
and because that's interesting, because I've spoken to a lot of like a wide variety of people offline about this sort of thing, and there's like it takes all sorts, and there's the people who have to go out there and get numb to shooting people actively, but there's also the people who have to get numb to the idea of supporting that behind a desk.
Right. Yeah, you definitely have to do that too. There's um like you just sort of have to either forget about it or just not think about, like, what if I'm helping what if I'm helping one of the jets bomb some village somewhere that has nothing to do with anything, and it's just sort of like you kind of have to just, like, if I think about it, I'm not gonna if I think about it too much, I'm just gonna go insane, so I better just not think about it.
So it's a game of suppression.
Basically, yeah.
And and while you're suppressing it, like, did you did it take a toll on your mind to do that at all?
Yeah, I'd say so. um
So in what way? Can you expand on that? I don't want to get too personal, because I know that I know that A, you're trying to stay anonymous, and B,
right.
it could be, something fairly difficult to talk about. But like, if you could just give us an idea of what went through your mind on a regular basis, and whether or not it was taxing later on, whether or not basically it changed you for the worse.
um a lot of the suppression ended up being like ended up leading to outright depression, where I was just sort of like suppressing more or less all emotions. Um, where it was just sort of like just one foot in front of the other, not doing just doing as I'm told, just getting the job done, trying to make sure I'm able to focus, and I'm just trying to just staying sane, and just not worrying about anything else but just doing my job, and that's it. There was just no sense of worry.
Purpose.
Yeah, purpose. Yeah, just just doing my job for the 6 hours a day, until doing the job 6 hours a day, then going back to sleep, then waking up, doing the job 6 hours a day, back to sleep, so on and so forth.
Because that's the thing, like a lot of these recruiters try and get the listless young men who are like, and it is young men, by the way, for any
Yeah.
of you who are gonna call me out like for being sexist or whatever. It's primarily men, so take your head out of your ass. Um, so, but pretty much like they get the listless young men with no purpose and they point them in a direction, and that's like they sort of take advantage of people's insecurity for a lack of purpose.
Right.
And like that, because that's why the sort of like Call of Duty commercials do so well, because they make it seem like you're going to be out there with everybody, and they don't talk about whether or not you're going to be behind a desk. They don't talk about you mopping the john or scrubbing the proverbial toilet with your proverbial toothbrush as a punishment. They don't talk about any of the stuff that's doldrummy. They want to excite you. They want to appeal to that masculine testosterone, like you'll get bigger balls if you do this kind of thing.
Right. And to even talk to the people that might call you out for being sexist, the ones that the recruiters that'll aim for the young females to join, they'll point out for like it'll give you a sense of purpose. It'll people will take you seriously and shit like that, and that's still sort of bullshit too. Because
Yeah, especially since, like, I mean, you're talking about the military. They might take you seriously if they've seen you in action, but a lot of them are sort of misogynist.
yeah, no, there's a lot of, well, not a whole lot of sort of about it. There's like when I first got to the ship, like I was like, "Hi, my name's Max," and like, literally the first thing they said, like, "Don't talk to any of the females. There's only 3 kinds of females in the Navy. There are bitches, there are sluts, and there are dykes."
Yeah, that seems pretty standard for a military operation.
It's like I was like, okay, wow, that's horrible. I I mean, don't get me wrong. I've met some fairly nice females in the military, but that was the first thing they told me, and it was like, and when when you're 19, 20, it's like, oh wow, that's someone 5 ranks above me said that. Well, I better take them seriously then.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and not to mention that if you start to step out of that line, that
yeah,
like everybody's just gonna say, "I told you so," if anything goes wrong.
right, and it's
Play
like,
that game.
and it was like, yeah, it is entirely misogynistic up in the military there. Or I mean, if you're not putting out your if you don't put out you're a bitch, if you put out you're a slut, anything else you're a dyke, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and on that level, how many people did you know that broke that sort of rule?
Like how many females?
Either.
Well, I can only think of like, honestly, maybe like 3 or 4 females that were pretty decent. That sort of broke out of that mold, I guess.
Gotcha.
And like maybe probably roughly around 20 guys that weren't misogynistic and weren't
So
like
on
total dicks about it.
Yeah. So I mean on that level, um essentially it wasn't based necessarily in merit, but mostly in the tribe mentality.
Right, yeah. Oh, definitely. It was very, very tribal.
Gotcha. All right. So like when you were in there,
Uh-huh.
um it has this strong tribal mentality. It has this like doldrummy accept what you're told and just do it mentality. It has this delegate down mentality. Did you get any hostility from people?
A couple times. Um, there were times when I would like. Well, there was one time during A school. I can't remember the guy's name, but like for whatever reason, I would. There was this guy. There was a guy in A school that would like for like he would like wear rainbow belts and sort of act sort of stereotypically gay. He wasn't apparently. I'm not sure why I knew that or how I knew that, but he wasn't. Um, but like for whatever reason, he was getting like in class he was getting bullshit about it for oh, I bet he's gay, and I was like, and I spoke up for him saying, you know what, that's sort of bullshit. Well, this was before Don't Ask Don't Tell was repealed. um and I was like, this is bullshit. Why would he do that? This, why would he actually be that way? If anything, if anyone's gay, it's probably the fucking SEALs or whatever that are being overly masculine or what, trying to overcompensate for to overcompensate for being gay. And I kind of got shit for that. And apparently like about the next couple days there was some graffiti of me and that stereotypically gay person. There was a picture of me and that guy like giving each other blowjobs or something, like some graffiti on some stairwell somewhere in the
Oh, so like stick figures or something?
yeah,
Gotcha.
just
Okay.
for defending that guy.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you're talking tribalism, there's going to be some intertribal like
Right,
fighting and rivalry.
right. And that was
So
some
that was
bullshit.
what?
I was just saying that's some bullshit.
Yeah. All right. So my last question, I guess, and
Huh.
take as long as you want. What would you say to anybody who is considering signing up to try and convince them not to? Like, and be as persuasive as you want.
Um, I mean, I could just say don't, but I know that won't work too well. Um, well, let's see. Consider that. I mean, yeah, I mean, I could pull up, all this stuff about that you're not really fighting for, to defend freedom at home or whatever. You're just fighting to bomb brown people in the Middle East, and freedom isn't really over there. You're not protecting freedom over there much at all. But that hasn't really seemed to work too well. So let's try veteran suicide rates. I'm going to go ahead and look that up if you don't mind here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Uh,
Because that's a huge problem, and it's also something that people don't consider. They don't consider the PTSD. They don't consider remembering the stink, like we discussed on the last sort of State Smash podcast episode. They don't consider all of the you don't get smell-o-vision in Call of Duty.
Right. No, that's okay. So 22 veterans commit suicide every day.
Yep.
Every single day.
And you could be one of those.
Yeah. Any one of you that are thinking about joining could be one of those. The VA doesn't care about you. The VA healthcare system does not care about you.
And there's no reason it should. I mean, the only thing it's designed to do is patch you up so that you can go back out there, or patch you up so that you don't, shoot up a hospital here.
Yep.
They don't actually care about you. They're there to preserve their own employment.
Yep. But yeah, that's what I'd have to say. That's just look up veteran suicides and how crappy the VA. But I do need to get going.
Yeah. That was that was going to be the last question. This is going to be a generally about 50 minutes to an hour, right. And I'm glad that you decided to come on and discuss your life in the Navy and generally give a perspective, because it's always good to get that next perspective. That's what I care about. Yep. The more people hear from the more variety of perspectives, the more likely they are to make better decisions than joining. state machine of oppression. So thank you very much for coming on, and I'll see you in the anti-war Discord chat.
Yep, thanks for having me.
All right, be well, man.
Yep, you too.
This has been the State Smash Podcast, Episode 2, and signing up. Be well, all.